Question regarding the family. I'm extremely proud of my son Hunter. He has overcome an addiction. He's one of the brightest, most decent men I know, and I am satisfied that I'm not going to do anything. I said I abide by the jury decision. I will do that, and I will not pardon him.
I will abide by the jury decision, and I will not pardon him. Well, that didn't last long. That didn't, that didn't last long. Joe Biden came out and pardoned his kid. So there is that. I want to bring in my guests. We are joined with Ted Rall. Ted Rall is a political cartoonist, syndicated columnist, and a great friend of the show. Ted, man, welcome to the show, man. How you doing this morning?
I'm doing good. I one of the reasons I don't kill myself every morning is because I always want to be surprised. You don't know what you would miss if you were dead. And my level of cynicism about politics, I always think it's hit rock bottom. I'm like, no. There's a sub basement underneath there. There's a cellar. There's a storm sewer beneath that. And then there's a fallout shelter from the 1950s down below there. Then there's a couple of old abandoned subways under there. And I think we've now hit like Cold War era Terminator 3 kind of like deep inside the bunker of insanity. The level of cynicism is truly breathtaking and wildly entertaining.
Ted, I agree with you. I think somebody else that may agree with both of you is Steve Gill. I want to bring him in too. Steve Gill.
Hey, Steve.
Good morning, guys.
Steve Gill is an attorney and CEO of Gill Media, a Nashville, Tennessee-based public affairs media marketing company. He also served as Director of Intergovernmental Affairs for the U.S. Trade Representative. Steve, I was just talking about the pardon for Hunter Biden, and that is after Joe Biden said he will not pardon his kid. And what's wild about this too, first thing I thought of when this pardon came up was, well, Joe Biden was in Congress screaming at people who are on crack, saying, I don't care what their upbringing was. I don't care what they went through. Throw them in prison. In fact, I think I have that clip. In fact, I do have that clip. So this is Joe Biden in Congress saying he doesn't necessarily care about the situation people are going through. Throw him in jail, hang him high, Joe Biden. At least I thought we had that clip. Give me 1 second. Let me pull that up. It's telling me that it failed all of a sudden. Right here. Joe Biden, hang him high.
If you have a piece of crack cocaine, no bigger than this quarter that I'm holding in my hand, 1/4 of $1. We passed a law through the leadership of Senator Thurmond and myself and others, a law that says you're caught with that, you go to jail for 5 years. You get no probation. You get nothing other than 5 years in jail. Judge doesn't have a choice. If you have.
Well, that's what he said, for his kid. If you was fine with throwing other people's kids in jail for extended periods of time for crack cocaine. And to be fair to Hunter Biden, they didn't get him on that. They got him on a gun charge, which ended up being felonies, and they got him on the tax charges. I think it was 3 felonies and 6 misdemeanors that he pleaded guilty to. Steve, let me start with you on this one. Give me your take on this. I mean, I understand. I get it. And I even predicted that Joe Biden was going to do this. By the same token, it's still trashy. Hunter Biden has been involved in criminality going back for God knows how long. Whether it was the crack, whether it was the prostitutes, whether it was the stuff that was in a laptop in regards to the financial deals, whether it's Farrah charges, Joe Biden has given him a blanket pardon for 10 years of criminality. That is pretty astonishing. I don't care that it's his dad, it's still this notion that the federal government is now giving a pass to president kids. Give me your take on this, Steve, and I'm going to get you next, Ted.
Well, Joe Biden is down on crack cocaine unless it's the cocaine found in the White House that may be attached to his son or some of his top senior staffers. Apparently, Dementia Joe got so caught up in pardoning those Thanksgiving turkeys, he just decided to, expand it to his turkey of a son as well and give him this blanket 10-year pardon. Look, this is not about Hunter Biden's crimes. This is about Joe Biden's crimes that extend back to the money he was getting from Hunter's Burisma $1 million a month deal, the Chinese money, the FARA violations, the 10% for the big guy. Joe's brother, Jim Biden, is still under investigation for various healthcare fraud cases. This is all about hiding the Biden crime family, not, exonerating his son from the crimes that he's been convicted of. And I'm predicting that Joe Biden will be forced to pardon himself next. Article 2, Section 2 of the Constitution allows the president very broad capacity to grant pardons for federal crimes, except for impeachment. You can't pardon somebody from being impeached, which, by the way, ironically, Donald Trump was impeached for asking for an investigation of the crimes that Joe Biden has just pardoned Hunter Biden for committing.
Yep.
So again, the impeachment can't be foreclosed. But I know that Joe Biden is going to have to pardon himself and others high up in his administration, because this is really about the Biden family cover up, not about Hunter Biden's crimes.
Ted, give me your take on that. I mean, look, the Hunter Biden laptop was a big deal, and they suppressed that laptop through and through. Divine, the woman that works at New York Times, she has this book, Laptop from Hell, where they point out, it's not the crack, it's not the prostitutes, it's the other stuff that's in that book. And it's, that judge, when he went to court, asked, will you be charging him with a FARA charge? And they said, maybe. And the other people said no, because they understood Hunter Biden was making all of these deals, leveraging his dad's name to make these deals, Biden Inc. So from your point of view, I mean, is it about the laptop more than his kid, or is it about both? What are your thoughts, Ted?
Oh, it's definitely about both. It covers both. And I think we shouldn't just gloss over the brazenness of this lie, right? I mean, look, both the president and his surrogates and his press secretary have repeatedly stated categorically that he would absolutely not pardon Hunter Biden. And obviously, nothing's changed in terms of the circumstances of Hunter Biden's convictions, his conviction and his pending charges. And yet he's gone ahead and done that. I mean, there's a number of really toxic implications here for the country and for the Democrats. I mean, for the country, you have now both President-elect Trump and President Biden telling the American people that the Department of Justice and by extension the federal government is hopelessly politicized and cannot be trusted. That they've been very clear about that. So both major parties, standard bearers, are now saying that. That's obviously has some major political implications. You also have a lame duck president who basically has made very clear, oh, I lied to you. I intended to do this all along, and I just said whatever in order to make the press shut up. And I know that I'm not going to be held accountable for it. And in fact, the first thing I did this morning was to go look at some of the, mainstream newspapers like the New York Times and the Washington Post editorial pages to see what kind of commentary there might be. The New York Times has one very half-length editorial by their one of their few conservative commentators that is appropriately outraged, but no further commentary, no editorial. Certainly the liberals are like the birds are, the crickets are chirping. Over at the Washington Post, there's literally there's not a single word. This is a newspaper that spent the last 2 weeks running editorial after editorial about the 50th anniversary of one of its columnists, George Will. Don't get me wrong, George Will is a great writer, but I think this is a little more important than that. And it's gotten absolutely no ink whatsoever on the editorial page of the Washington Post. look, this is going to massively, this is one of the most breathtakingly cynical moves by an American politician of my lifetime. I'm 61 years old.
Yeah.
It's perhaps as controversial as Gerald Ford's pardon of Richard Nixon, which I have to admit at the time I criticized vociferously, and for most of my life I was always against. I came to understand the wisdom of it so that the country could move on. This is not something like that. I had advocated that Joe Biden should pardon Trump, actually. I thought it would have been a really nice bipartisan gesture to help the country move on in keeping with the spirit of Gerald Ford. But obviously, this is a disgusting, bitter old man who is just looking out for his own interests and his family's narrow parochial interests. I mean, nothing about any criticism about the Biden crime family, you can't put it aside now. There's just no way to counter it now.
Well, and to Ted's point, Joe Biden wanted to underline that Trump is right about the problems at the Department of Justice and the FBI. I mean, he's like, okay, I'm going to prove it. And to Ted's point about the Miranda Devine book, what changed over the weekend, besides pardoning a couple of turkeys and decided to extend it to Hunter. Hunter apparently threatened over the weekend he was going to write a book and expose all the secrets of the Biden crime family. And that was what the final straw of Joe going, whoa, we can't let that happen. We can't let Hunter start talking. By the way, he loses his Fifth Amendment protections and can now be called before Congress and other agencies to testify about others because he can't plead the Fifth anymore. So This story is not over, which is, again, why I think Joe Biden will have to pardon himself and anybody else who could be implicated in the abuse of the Department of Justice, the FBI, and covering up the Biden family crime syndicate.
What's fascinating about this, Ted, you're absolutely right. Both of you are, actually. It delegitimizes the justice system. Donald Trump and Joe Biden are effectively saying the justice system can't be trusted. They tend to go after people for political ends, because that's Hunter Biden's argument. That's even Joe Biden's argument. They going after my son for political reasons. It has nothing to do with the crack. It has nothing to do with the gun charge and lying on the gun charge. I mean, for God's sake, he signed the gun charge saying he was not addicted to any kind of substances while he was addicted to crack. And when they went into court, he argued, well, he wasn't addicted to crack when he filled the gun charge out, because he thought that he had been, rehabilitated. The next day, the prosecution shows that he sent a text message saying he was in the car, cracked out. And another text message that he was waiting for Mookie, his crack dealer. It's like, okay, this is utterly outrageous.
But Jamal, he was also using as an excuse for some of the other crimes that he was addicted to crack and didn't have any understanding of what he was doing. Okay, so I'm not on crack when it comes to buying a gun illegally, but I'm on crack when it comes to trying to get sympathy from the American people. And let me underline something Ted said. By the way, it's great to be back with Ted Rall and you, Jamal, as well. The hypocrisy of the media, who spent all these months telling us, oh, there's no way he will pardon Hunter. Karine Jean-Pierre going the obsequious press secretary. There's no way he'll do this. I watched 40 minutes of Morning Joe this morning, just so you guys wouldn't have to watch it. Not one mention of the pardon in 40 minutes.
Well, I suspect they agree. The entire time you saw Joe Biden in that speech is effectively saying if people are doing crack, they need to be put in prison. But when it comes to Hunter, it's a dad who loves his child. That's all it is. Who's had a difficult time in life, who we need to give sympathy to, et cetera, et cetera. Ted, I agree with you thoroughly. Like, not only does it delegitimize the justice system, it's a deeply cynical move where Joe Biden spent the last year saying he's not going to get involved. They haven't even convicted him, meaning they've convicted him, but they haven't even given a sentence yet, meaning they've punted that to December. So we don't even know what sentence Hunter Biden would have received. Hunter Biden might not have even received a jail sentence. And Joe Biden is arguing that all of these people are just after my son and just trying to put him in jail. I think that is utterly outrageous. But nevertheless, that is where we are.
By the way, how can any Democrat or Republican oppose Kash Patel as FBI director in the wake of this. It ought to be a unanimous vote that, yeah, we got to clean out the FBI, the DOJ, bring back Matt Gaetz as Attorney General, ram these people through, because any pretense that all is well, kind of like that final scene in Animal House, all is not well, you're going to have to rip it out by the roots. Kash Patel ought to float through with 100% support.
Well, let's go into that, Ted. So Donald Trump has said that one of his first things, well, okay, some of his nominees I think are lunatics. Others I like. Tulsi Gabbard, RFK Jr., I like those picks. The other ones I like a little bit less, much less, to be honest. Trump has said the first thing that he's going to do is to deal with the issue of the First Amendment. And what he meant by that is conflating this definition of anti-Semitism with hate speech, basically criticism of Israel being anti-Semitic, and he's using that as one of his main pillars to go after various people. He's even had people in his administration come out saying, yes, that is going to be one of the things that we do. We are going to go after protesters of Israel. Give me a take on that. Republicans have screamed about censorship. They have screamed about being the party of the First Amendment. Now they're talking about doing this. Isn't that somewhat contradictory? Give me your thoughts, Ted.
Well, it is. I mean, look, you're either for free speech or you're not. And the free speech you have to be the most for is the free speech you disagree with, because that's the stuff that you're going to be likely to want to censor first, right? Unfortunately, and it's a truism, everybody's for their own free speech, and everyone wants to shut up the other side that they disagree with. And this is just another example. It's hard to imagine. I have to admit, I don't, as someone who criticizes Israel, and there's a lot to criticize today in particular, I don't think that I'm not losing any sleep over the idea that Trump's goons are going to come and arrest me for criticizing Israel and accusing me of illegal anti-Semitism, just because I don't think that passes any constitutional muster, even with some, really right-wing conservative judges. I just don't think that'll work. If that's happened, then obviously then we're done and the republic's finished and we could just roll the whole thing up. But if that is, it's not something that gives Republicans any credibility, right? I mean, you get credibility when you say things like, I will fight for the right. I disagree with you, but I'll fight for your right to say, things that I hate to the death. And I think that's not what we have here on either side. Nothing should be protected from criticism. No subject, no group, no country, no nation state, no religion, nothing. And it's dispiriting to see this. I agree with you about the cabinet picks, by the way. I mean, it's really funny because it's like sort of a bizarro world to see the analysis in the media. Oh, Marco Rubio, that's reasonable. I'm like, not to me. RFK Jr., he's crazy. I'm like, yeah, who would ever really want healthy food? That sounds awful. I don't want to. It's like I love eating in Europe. The food
Right.
tastes better.
Same here.
So yeah, but yeah, no, we'll see what happens, right? I mean, it's also I'm kind of like marveling at the fact that there's just the left. I shouldn't say the left, because the left isn't really in mix here, but liberals and Democrats, they're so despondent these days that they don't really have much to say at all, right? They're just sort of like, oh, well, Trump's coming in. We'll see what happens, and then we'll disagree with him when he comes in. I mean, I almost feel sorry for them. I'm like, come on, like a little spirit here. Like, get some pink pussy hats. Do something.
Well, they've lost on a massive effing level. They are licking wounds. Steve, give me your take on that. Trump's
Yeah,
goons.
look, I'm a strong supporter of Israel, and
I know
I
you
agree
are.
with Ted that you mess with the First Amendment, at your own risk. And again, I think the efforts to come down on anti-Semitism, while admirable in terms of a talking point, when you start trying to evoke the law to shut down speech you don't like, you're really crossing a big boundary. that we shouldn't even get near to. I think you can criticize Israel without being anti-Semitic. I can criticize Northern Ireland without being anti-Catholic, and I think we've got to do a better job of drawing those distinctions. The problem I have is not I mean, I have a problem with anti-Semitic speech or any other kind of horrific speech. My problem is when you have colleges and universities or cities who are encouraging that. Again, I can't allow a kid to pray in school because it crosses the line of government involvement, and yet when the government or these state public institutions, colleges and universities, are encouraging or treating this violent anti-Semitic protest on campus as acceptable rather than cracking down on it, both in terms of trespassing, violence, destruction of property. When you're encouraging that kind of speech as a government entity or as a sub entity, as a college or university, that to me is where you cross the line where the government can step in. But if I want to go hold a Palestinian flag on a street corner and scream how I hate Israel, I don't like it, but that's your right.
It's like, God bless. I don't like it. Ted, have these been violent, horrific, property damaging protests? In the way Steve has been saying, just rabidly anti-Semitic protests on college campuses that's been encouraged by the colleges. Give me your thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, look, I would take issue with that. I agree with Steve, obviously, about the issue of obviously, I deplore anti-Semitism. True leftists are absolutely disgusted by anti-Semitism, and it's definitely a no-go zone for people who are truly interested in social justice. That said, I mean, Israel is a nation state, and it's like when a nation state engages in a war or various policies of discrimination or whatever that are controversial or subject to criticism, it's not inherently anti-Semitic to call those things out. And I think that to say the least, it's been radically exaggerated. That there's a lot of anti-Semitism as part of, or even any substantial amount of anti-Semitism as part of last spring's college and university protests against Israel's actions in Gaza. Look, have I been to every single minute of every single protest that occurred last spring and summer? Of course not. But I'm always kind of frustrated whenever I hear about these incidents, and they're cited, and I'm like, okay, well, can I please see an example on, we live in a world where everything's being videoed and taped at every single time. You go to the bathroom, someone's got a video of it, I'm sure. And it's like, nobody can show you anything. You can't, it tends to be, well, they said, oh, from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. And I'm like, to say the very least, that's it is far from established that that's an anti-Semitic statement. I would argue
that's
that it's
Likud. That's in their policy. I mean, that's literally Likud's policy. That was in their policy documents. That was one of their objectives, one of their goals. But when the Palestinians said, "Oh, of course, it's anti-Semitic," I want to go to the Democrats. They are not dealing with this loss well. And if you remember, Bernie Sanders came out and effectively said something vaguely sounding like he wanted a new party, but he criticized them, and the Democrats took umbrage at his criticism. Basically, we have lost the working class. You have lost the working class because you wasn't representing the interests of the working class. Donald Trump got the working class in that last vote. The Teamsters, the majority of them wanted Trump, which is why, for the first time in my lifetime, that they didn't back and support the Democratic Party. This is MSNBC. They have been losing their mind. Joanne Reed says she's not fixing tofurkey for people who voted for Trump, and that she doesn't trust people who voted for Trump, and that you should, dislike your relatives and distrust your relatives. She is losing her mind. This is MSNBC responding to something that Sanders said. Now, they have fake Republican Christopher Steele on here commenting, which is just fantastic. Right here.
So you had Bernie Sanders tweeting on Monday, if the Democratic Party is to become a Democratic Party, the first job of the new DNC chair is to get the super PAC money out of Democratic primaries. AIPAC and other billionaire-funded super PACs cannot be allowed to select Democratic candidates. They typically don't. They're not going to put their money into a DNC chairman's race. So again, for me, as the former head of a party, as county chairman and a state chairman, that to me is short-sighted thinking about where the landscape is. One thing that has very little to do with the other. Super PACs and all those guys play in elections and campaigns. That's a different conversation than running for chairman and telling the people who are going to write checks, we don't want you writing checks.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. With all due respect to Senator Sanders, you might want to join the party if you want to have something.
Well, there is that.
Like that little part, he might want to join the party before he criticizes the party in this way. Now, what Sanders is saying here is straightforward. His point is, if you are going to allow people to dump all of this money into political campaigns, then that is going to contort the political party and what they go for. And that seeing that the American public looks at the Democratic Party as being an elitist party or a party that is not representative of the working class, maybe the fact that you're getting $1.5 billion to run a race and all of these billionaires are putting money into your pocket, maybe that is altering what you would typically run for. That is his point. Christopher Steele knows that's his point. This woman with the glasses knows that's his point, and yet they're going to attack Sanders for this as opposed to listening to what Sanders is saying. Steve, I want to get your take on this. From your point of view, what political parties are usually decided by the side with the most cash. Do you think that there's a contradiction in the Democratic Party that needs to be addressed in some way? And I know this is a Republican point of view, but I'm curious on how you view all of this argument about campaign donations and how it affects political outcomes in regards to what parties shoot for.
Well, it's interesting that Sanders wants to draw the line when it comes to super PACs, but doesn't have any problem with labor union money that's been dumping billions into Democratic Party races. And this time, their rank and file broke with them. He's not trying to draw the line on Soros money. He's not trying to draw the line on Hollywood money, celebrity money. He just wants to, get rid of the money that Republicans tend to also get as well from these super PACs. I think it's, the money does not just talk in politics, it screams loudly. One of the reasons that Republicans ended up with such a narrow margin in the House is that Democrats outspent Republican House candidates across the country by about a 5-to-1 margin. That's why Republicans didn't pick up more House seats. That and the fact that they're still counting and finding votes in California and these places, several weeks, almost a month after the election, because they're still counting until they get the number they need to win. So they're still converting Republican House seats to Democrat. But the big thing was that 5-to-1 spending advantage in House races. And I'm not hearing Bernie calling for a crackdown on those numbers, including the Act Blue money laundering scheme that has people who, are destitute on welfare that were supposedly, giving tens of thousands of dollars through Act Blue to Democrat candidates.
Ted, what's your thoughts on this? I mean, I got to be honest. Look, from Sanders' point of view, he wants this notion of workers, i.e. labor unions. So yeah, of course he's not going to have an issue with that. He believes that labor unions are representative of the majority of the working class. Zero issue with it. I have zero issue with it. His point is, if you have a Democratic Party, meaning not the Republican Party, a Democratic Party that is supposed to represent the interests of, let's say, the rest of us, as opposed to the top 1%, then maybe you shouldn't be taking money from the 1% in a way that can contort your policies. Ted, give me your take on this. I mean, how do you see it? And how do you see the Democratic resistance to what Sanders is pointing out may be part of the problem of why you've lost the working class?
Well, you can sort of see part of the resistance to it just in the fact that Steele and the other panelists there, pretended not to understand or maybe they didn't understand the content of what Sanders said. They kind of implied that he was talking about the selection process for the Democratic National Committee as opposed to the funding of Democratic primary candidates, which are two completely different things. And Sanders' point is that obviously the party can set rules for what Democratic potential nominees for the presidency what kind of money they can accept and from whom, and that they can and they should They don't even want to discuss. They can't even frame the argument accurately enough in order to shoot it down. I think Sanders is right. He's usually right about a lot of things. I'm a little bit dismayed that he waited to be safely reelected in this latest cycle for another 6-year term at the age of 83 to finally come out as a super fighter for the liberal cause. But I guess, better, 20 years late than never. But that said, here we are. And, he's right. Like, nothing's going to change here. And I think what he's engaged in, frankly, is an exercise that I'm kind of familiar with, which is he's making an argument that he knows will be rejected. And he's doing it in order to have it publicly rejected so that it's on the record, so that the powers that be who run the Democratic Party are forced to say, yeah, no, we're going to have all these special interests and super PACs run the party because we kind of like it. I think what he's doing, he's clearly signaled in that broadside that he issued the day after the election, he is going to try to launch either a third party or to try to scale up our revolution into some sort of left-wing blue MAGA attempt to take over the Democratic Party from the left.
83? At 83 years old?
I mean, he's an energetic guy.
83?
I know. He's an energetic guy, but I'm like, I don't know how energetic he is to be able to do that. I mean, and I think it's like he's not the guy at this time. And I don't even know, frankly, if it can be done. I mean, the Republican Party is more small d Democratic than the Democratic d Democratic Party, because the Republican Party, if they let the winner of the primary win the nomination, when the Republican voters like someone, they put him up. I always point to the election of Arnold Schwarzenegger in the Gray Davis recall election in California. The state GOP did not want Schwarzenegger at all, but when they saw that Republican voters in California liked him, they stepped aside. They didn't put their greasy thumbs on the scale. They let him have the nomination, and he went on to become a very impressive and successful governor. Really what California wanted, which was a liberal Republican. Really kind of makes sense for California at that time, and in many times it made that to me is a model, and that's not possible. The Democratic Party with their super delegate process, with all their shenanigans, like feeding the debate questions to their preferred candidate, forgetting to send to send their representatives to the Iowa caucuses. To count the delegates that Bernie Sanders won. Mm-hmm. I mean, this kind of the chair throwing allegations in the Nevada caucuses, all these kind of things. The Republicans don't do that crap. They let their voters decide, and they end up with better candidates. Remember that book, The Emerging Democratic Majority? And it was all reliant entirely on the idea of demographics, that like all the recent arrivals from Latin America were going to probably become Democrats, and that Republicans would become an obsolete national party because there'd be so many registered Democrats. Republicans could just not win except local races in flyover country. That didn't happen. Why? Yeah. Because Democrats decided we don't want to relinquish control to our voters. We want to run things, and it's like, so they end up with candidates like Hillary Clinton and and Kamala Harris, who are weak. One last point I want to really point out. The Democrats, they keep talking about we won in 2020. Look, no, you didn't. Not really. Donald Trump committed suicide in 2020 by telling his voters not to show up for early voting or for mail-in voting in the middle of a pandemic. If he hadn't done that, he would have won. So really, truly, Democrats haven't really won an election since 2012. And if they were aware of that,
and by the way, Trump cost Republicans 2 Senate seats in Georgia by telling people after he got beat in a snit in Georgia, don't go vote in the runoff elections. So he gave 2 Senate seats in Georgia to the Democrats that have been the margin. And Republicans would be sitting at 55, 56 seats if he hadn't done that. Now, there's a chance Republicans can take one of those back from Ossoff in 2 years. But Donald Trump not only cost a lot of seats in House, but Senate races as well. By the way, Jamal, it's the 1% doesn't just give to Republicans. When you talk about the 1%ers,
No,
the
you're right.
1% gives to both sides. But
You're right.
only the Democrats give money to the 1%ers. Remember, Kamala Harris was giving millions to Beyonce, to Oprah. So the Democrats are the ones who give millions to the 1%ers.
You're so right. Steve, I'm going to let you close this out. We have about 30 seconds. What is Trump going to do with the first 100 days when he gets in office? What do you think the main priorities are going to be?
I think the main reason they're jamming everything through with cabinet appointments and others as quickly as they recognize they've got about an 18-month window to get things done. The first 100 days are going to focus on the border, on the criminal illegals, because that was one of the top issues that people were voting on. So that's going to be the key focus. Tom Homan's already been down to the border, something that the Biden border czar, Kamala Harris, never did. So I think the focus is going to be on illegal immigration and getting this economy rolling again. And I think that's going to be the laser focus of the Trump administration the first 100 days.
Guys, thank you for this. I really appreciate it. You guys are my first panel that I've had on the show since coming back. This has been one of the things that I really wanted to do on Fault Lines, and so it's something I want to do on the show. I really appreciate both of you. Steve
Great
Gill.
catching up with you guys.
Thank you so much.
Oh,
Nice
man.
to see you again, Steve.
Thank you. Steve Gill and Ted Rall. Steve Gill is an attorney and CEO of Gill Media, a Nashville, Tennessee-based public affairs media marketing company. He also served as director of intergovernmental affairs. And we have Ted Rall, political cartoonist and syndicated columnist, also host of TMI with Manila Chan, the great, the one and only. Guys, thank you for this. I really appreciate it. You
Thanks,
guys have a
guys.
fantastic day.
Bye, guys.
Thanks.